Have you ever looked into a lake and seen a face that wasn't your own? Have you ever stepped into the water and felt the mud at the bottom seize your ankles, as if someone was still there, waiting? Have you ever heard whispers in the night from a place where no one lives and no one dies? Welcome back to the Whisper Horror channel, where stories are not told to scare, but to evoke memories of things never named. If you love chilling ghost stories, filled with spectral, quiet, and lurking shadows like reflections on water, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below the video so we can whisper together in the dark. And now, listen to a lake deep in Georgia, where people died and no one ever knew who they were. No papers, no bodies, no funerals, only water, and a message written with a trembling hand on a wet, ink-stained notebook. My name was never called correctly, and I am still here. June 14. Lake Lanier exploded under the early summer sun, the sky a clear blue, waves gently lapping at the grass where 12 students sat in a circle around a birthday cake. Addison Rowe sat slightly apart. No one noticed her phone in her jacket pocket, her brown eyes glinting with the pale gold of the late afternoon. Happy birthday. Drink up, Addie. Logan's voice rang out, as if this place held only joy, but the singing immediately rippled the water's edge and vanished, as if caught somewhere in Addison's throat. She smiled, but the smile lasted 2 seconds and disappeared. Addison stood up, stepping back from the phone's live stream light. 2 fingers toyed with the hem of her dress as she walked towards the lake, along a path where the chirping of crickets mingled with the hurried breaths echoing from memory. Where's Addison going? Mimi was engrossed in her cherry soda can, not looking up, probably calling her mom. Tyler shrugged, his eyes glued to his phone screen. But no, Addison didn't call anyone. She stopped by the water's edge, staring down into the lake. Her breath, pale yellow, filled the silent space. In the video Cody was secretly filming, Addison's shadow quietly folded close to the water's reflection. Addison softly called, "Who?" The screen trembled slightly. "Hey, Addie, stop it," Cody joked, his laughter mixed with the sound of water splashing ashore. Addison didn't turn around. The water gurgled. A whisper echoed back from the lake, so faint that only the camera could hear it. "Addison, Addie, son." She sat down, dipping her feet into the water. Last night she had dreamed of sinking, not by her feet, but by her very name, floating buoyantly amidst the cries of someone forgotten. In the eyes of her friends, the scene was ordinary, then suddenly turned into a nightmare. Addison stood up, leaving her sandals on the shore. She took off her jacket, wearing only a short white dress, tangled with grass. The wind tangled her hair, but her dark hair clung to her cheek, as if from long ago, already soaked with some night's dew. And so, Addison walked into the water, without a scream, without a struggle against the chilling current. She waded out, the water rising to her chest, then her neck. At that very moment, she stopped, raising her head to look directly into the camera. Addison's eyes were as cold as the lake's bottom. Her lips moved, soundlessly. It was only later, in slow motion, that people could guess what they uttered. "I am here." Instantly, a strange sound burst forth. From the midst of the water, a terrifying shriek rose, high-pitched like tearing metal. In the video, only a reversed fading voice could be heard. "Nen o wa chaj oi." The camera dropped from Cody's hand, the image shaking violently. The friends screamed, running towards Addison, but the lake was still. Where Addison had stood, only small ripples remained, then vanished. No sandals, no footprints, no bubbles, silence. The entire crowd froze, then screamed Addison's name in vain. Blood from Logan's hand, from gripping a broken beer can, dripped onto the grass, but no one took their eyes off the lake, which had become clear again, as if no shadow had ever touched it. A bizarre cry rose from the depths. This time, everyone clearly heard it. It wasn't Addison's voice. It was the voice of someone, of many, a sharp, fractured voice. "Don't call my name, don't call my name." No one could explain what had happened. Suddenly, Cody's phone automatically replayed the video, but the image was inverted, extending Addison's scream indefinitely. News of Addison's disappearance spread rapidly throughout the town. "Died in Lake Lanier." All rumors circulated with the video. Police arrived, Addison's family arrived, the press arrived, but no one found any trace of her. Addison's mother stood by the lake, clutching the collar of her cardigan, as if trying to hold on to her daughter's scent amidst the wind. Logan was held for questioning, the smell of blood still on his hands, and lake water up to his chest. Penny frantically sent dozens of messages to Addison, only to receive blue ticks, but no reply. 3 days, then 5 days, then 10 days. Still no one found Addison's sandals, jacket, or a single strand of her hair. Addison's medical records upon re-examination were unexpectedly half missing. All documents from after 2017 were unclear reprints, prescriptions with matching signatures, old-school records with erasures. Newspapers featured a series of long articles. Lanier Ghost Lake claims another victim. Addison Rowe, an empty death in vibrant youth. The video was edited, dubbed with ghostly sounds. It spread rapidly under the hashtag Addison Vanished. A volunteer diver, Jackson, who had saved 3 children from the waves, decided to dive into the lake. His GoPro recorded him slowly descending into the cold water, his flashlight sweeping across the muddy bottom. Suddenly Jackson saw an old, moss-covered rock, on which a trembling, jerky inscription was carved, "I am still here." After reading it, Jackson gasped, his snorkel tightening, feeling as if someone was pulling his legs deeper. The camera blurred. When he surfaced, Jackson said absolutely nothing about what he had seen. 3 more days later, on the steps of the old library, Mrs. Halpin, the librarian, over 70, found an old notebook, its cover soaked with faded ink. The first page had a trembling, slanted handwriting. "If you still carry a debt, come to the lake. I was never buried. And my name, no one ever called it right. No sender, no return address." Mrs. Halpin trembled. Her father's childhood stories about the debt-bearer echoed in her mind, the one who carried the unclaimed dead on his shoulders, seeking to reclaim the names of lost souls. She clutched the notebook, closed the library for the night, and mailed it directly with a scrawled note. Gabriel, who once returned names to the lost, more than 2,000 kilometers away, at a quiet Wyoming rest stop. Gabriel sat alone at a decaying wooden table. He contemplated his worn journal, the heavy light illuminating his calloused spine. Only when the package was handed to him did Gabriel look up. His stormy gray eyes rested for a long time on the words, "I am still here." He quietly closed his journal, lit an unlit cigarette, watching the invisible smoke dissolve before him. Not a word, not a tear. Gabriel gripped the map, flipping through its scratched folds, stopping at the red-marked spot, Lake Lanier, Georgia. He put on his coat, made no calls, and carried no luggage. Another debt, Gabriel murmured to himself. Stepping out into the night, Gabriel felt the cold penetrate deep into his skin, as if each unburied soul was a new layer of frost covering his shoulders. Addison Rowe's death sank heavily to the bottom of the lake, nameless waves constantly lapping at the grassy shore, a name never truly spoken, and the solitary debt-bearer began his journey, turning back towards the silver-glinting secrets at the bottom of the ghost lake. After Addison Rowe's death, Lake Lanier was no longer as peaceful as before. In the small blue house by the lake, Mrs. Viola Grant woke up early every day, carrying a basket of vegetables to the porch to wash under the running water. The early morning light spread across the water in the basin, dappling it with unnameable fears. Monday morning she bent down to pick up a handful of lettuce that had slipped from her hand. In the water, reflected behind her, was the shadow of a woman, thin, with heavy tangled black hair covering her shoulders. No face, just a pale pink area hidden beneath wet hair. Quietly trembling, startled, she quickly turned to look behind her, only to see an old wooden fence, bare of leaves and no one there. Letting out a breath, she reassured herself she hadn't slept enough lately, causing her to see things, but that image haunted her all morning. The next day, when she looked into the water again, the shadowy face in the basin was wearing blue plaid pajamas, exactly what she had worn last night. The person's eyes were closed, lips pale, eyelids slowly twitching, breathing heavily as if someone had just woken up from a long, unknown dream. Mrs. Grant curled up in her room all afternoon, dreading that the water flowing in her house contained forgotten memories of others. Spreading through whispers, rumors of water shadows disturbed the air, turning into tangible fear. The Judd couple, who had recently learned night kayaking to enjoy the quiet after a long day, recounted that they heard a heavy, unusual breathing sound underwater that night. Not waves, not swimming sounds, but like someone pressing their face into the water, struggling to live, surfacing and sinking without ever truly rising. The sound frequency meter on their smartphone accidentally captured a regular deep beat, repeating every 19 seconds, as violent as a heartbeat or the congested breath of someone struggling with panic. A local meteorologist, Kane Ellis, took wave samples for analysis. When compared to the database, he found this rhythm only matched human biological respiratory waves, but originating from the center of the lake. Something down there is emitting a signal, Kane warned his colleagues, his eyes fixed on the frequency diagram on the screen. It's not like natural wave resonance. This is real human breathing. Someone in extreme panic, unable to surface. One twilight afternoon, Logan, a 12-year-old boy with blonde hair, was fishing with his grandfather on a wooden bridge near the lake shore. His grandfather cast his line, while Logan fumbled with a small fish caught on the hook. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through, and the fishing rod slipped from Logan's hand, falling near the water's edge. He bent down to reach for it, but as soon as he touched the water, his body seemed to freeze, his eyes wide, lips moving. He whispered, "Martha, Mom, Martha." His grandfather saw him and lunged to grab Logan's leg, but at that moment, a strong pulling force from under the lake almost threw Logan off. Catching him, his grandfather struggled to pull him back, while Logan only pursed his lips. His eyes glazed over as he looked up at the sky. Strangely, despite being submerged close to the water, Logan's clothes were dry, and his hair showed no wet marks, but his hands had distinct bruises, the imprint of a woman's hand. The left pinky finger curled and twisted as if it had been broken a long time ago. 3 days later, when he woke up after a delirious night, Logan opened his eyes and whispered, "I called it wrong, Grandpa. Not Martha. She's angry, because no one ever called her name right. She's not angry at me. She's just sad," Logan said, touching the fading bruise. "If I called her name correctly, she'd probably be able to come ashore. But I can't remember what her name is." Gabriel wandered along the lake, the old notebook always in his pocket. The Georgia sky was painted golden in the afternoon, the wind from the lake playing around his every step. At the exact spot where Addison disappeared, Gabriel stopped and sat down. The edge of the lake had a deep muddy patch, like very old footprints with no way back. He reached out to touch the water. It was icy cold, the dry cold of sleepless souls, cold as the resentments that had fallen here and never resurfaced. Closing his eyes, Gabriel clearly heard each gentle ripple, a fractured sound pushing from the depths, tapping against the shore of his mind. Call the name correctly. Who is there? Suddenly, an old man with a bent back walked by the water's edge, his white hair falling across his forehead. He looked at Gabriel for about 10 seconds, then softly spoke, his voice blurred like the sound of decaying leaves. "You're late. They don't have names here anymore. If you call it wrong, your memory will stay in this lake forever." Gabriel watched the old man disappear, his heart heavy. For a moment, the reflection of the water cast a strange shadow on his face, his own but without eyes, without a nose, without lips, just a vast darkness waiting to be called by its true name. Lake Lanier was no longer a peaceful body of water. It was a distorted mirror, reflecting things people had forgotten, had gotten wrong, and if one called out the wrong name of someone it had swallowed, the faceless ones would cling to the memories of the living, turning every portrait in one's mind into a dense fog containing names no one dared to read. Because they didn't kill anyone, they just wanted someone to remember them, even if it meant trading their own memory, their own self and identity for those who dared to look into the depths. The old library's archive room in Seneca was only as large as a huge filing cabinet, but in this dust-laden space history was deeply absorbed into every paper edge, agonizing as if this very place had once died with forgotten names. Mrs. Halpin handed Gabriel a heavy steel key, her hand trembling slightly, her worried eyes looking down the dark, narrow staircase. "You're the first person to ask about these records in nearly 20 years, Gabriel. People prefer Google searches, but you look for old ink documents." The safe door etched with the year 1962 swung open, and the smell of old ink, leather and rusty iron hit his nostrils directly. Inside, hundreds of time-stained yellow folders were neatly arranged, their edges stamped with a red circular seal, insufficient records for naming. Gabriel carefully pulled out a file, missing persons records from the 60s to 80s, pages of death certificates with incomplete lines, pencil notes in rows, no next of kin, no verification, drowned without body, swept away by waves, no police report. Some names were ruthlessly crossed out, below them a scrawled ink line, "Stranger." No birth certificate. No one could hold back tears. Mrs. Halpin searched for the original hydrological maps, sketches of the old ground beneath the lake. Some areas were marked unsurveyed. Gabriel,
Back then, machinery was limited, and people wanted to finish early to get resettlement land. Gabriel stood silently before the black and white map, the lake's quietness telling him more than any electronic data ever could. On the decaying wooden table in the damp basement, Gabriel spread out two maps, one a modern scan, vibrant with colors and clear satellite data, the other a faded red and black ink draft, hand-sketched, its edges moldy, covered in intricate folds. He compared them, lightly running his finger over the intersection of two worlds. Area 1, a deep depression appearing like a wound in the calm lake. On the old map, it was Claymore Cemetery, where at least 30 graves, many unnamed, had been buried. A long red note, not fully relocated, heavy rain, hastily filled. Area 2, Jericho Crossing, once a hastily built settlement to meet the lake's deadline. A faded ink fingerprint remained here, faintly impressing the name of the signatory. Hasty construction, no final census. Area 3, an unnamed depression, only a large erasure, and a complaining note. Unsurveyed. Landslide area, no sonar, no diving data. On the digital map, all these areas were simply noted. Area not thoroughly surveyed. Missing data / no data found. Gabriel meticulously drew 3 red circles on the old paper, where the pen tip passed. A layer of black dust fell, smelling faintly of dead algae. He inhaled deeply, his throat dry as if he had just swallowed old lake water, where no two smells were alike, only the scent of living things and corpses, of memories absorbed into the mud. Mrs. Halpin leaned closer, whispering as the pale yellow basement light illuminated her gray hair. "There's a man, Ephraim Brandt. He was the oldest worker in charge of digging the cemetery back then. Ever since the hasty relocation, Ephraim hasn't worked for the management anymore, living hidden in a lakeside cabin. Hardly anyone has visited him for decades." She bowed her head, fiddling with a string of keys, as if fearing every sound would disturb a layer of ghostly dust. He was the last one to touch those nameless coffins, Gabriel, and the first to hear tapping from inside the wooden planks, when the mud hadn't fully covered them. Only he knows. In truth, who else lies unrested beneath the lake? Gabriel wrote down the name and vague address in his small notebook, his eyes glinting with something both agonizing and resolute. The destiny of a debt-bearer perhaps lay in the whispers of those who survived long enough to pass on memories. Late at night, Lake Lanier was heavy with a thick fog, casting a fading light of erased memories upon its surface. Gabriel walked to the shore, holding a pitcher of water to wash off the paper dust from the basement. He bent down, scooping cold water into his cupped hands. The water soaked into his skin, cold as if it were someone's memory, not natural water. Moonlight spilled over the lake, clearly illuminating Gabriel's shadow, but beside him, in the silent reflection, was a pale white hand placed on his shoulder. The hand did not tremble, unaffected by the wind. Gabriel turned, only swaying willow branches and darkness, but his shirt, on his left shoulder, was soaked as if it had just been submerged, though he hadn't touched the shore. Gabriel looked down at his hand, a swollen mark imprinted, a distinct reversed writing. "I am from Area 3. You don't remember my name, but I remember you." The water on his hand foamed with small bubbles, a strong fishy smell. The wind whistled like the wailing echo of countless departed generations. Gabriel looked up, his eyes darkening in the night, realizing that the boundary between the living and the dead at Lake Lanier was gradually blurring, layer by layer. Not every body of water is surveyed, not every death is recorded by name, and not every soul is patient enough to wait their turn. Some of them have begun to come ashore, gently clinging to those who still listen to the call from the depths. Gabriel, the silent debt-bearer, now bore the mark of a person from Area 3, and with every step on solid ground, he knew that beyond the lake, memories silently opened their eyes, watching, demanding their own names back.
3 days after Addison's disappearance, Lake Lanier was shrouded in a thick fog, like late autumn mornings. That night, Hollis Drew, a fisherman who had lived his whole life by this water, steered his small wooden boat to check his nets, while everyone else in town was fast asleep. His flashlight swept over the waves, its beam hitting cold metal pipes. Suddenly, Hollis yanked the rudder. In the middle of the deep lake, a young girl stood frozen, her head bent close to her chest, a white dress glimpsed in the mist. She didn't tremble, her feet placed in the waves yet remaining intact as if standing on solid ground. Hollis trembled, rowing closer, trying to shout, "Girl, what are you doing out there? Stand still, I'll pull you in." but before he could reach out to pull her over, the girl seemed to have her strings cut, her body collapsing limply, without a sound. Her body floated lightly towards the boat, as if it had no weight, no breath. When Hollis pulled her up, the lake water still gurgled over the side of the boat, but her entire body was dry, except for her long hair, dripping cold water like dead algae. The girl lay there, eyes half closed, chest faintly rising and falling with weak breaths, a cold, fishy smell lingering around her like water mist seeping from her bones to her skin. The whole town was shaken. The strange girl was taken to the hospital, lying on a white bed, under the flashing lights of the damp corridor. Doctors asked for her name. She shook her head. "I don't remember who I am. I don't know why I'm here." Photos of Addison were brought. The face was eerily similar, but not an exact replica. Addison's family, upon seeing her, recoiled, tears welling up. "My child doesn't have eyes like this. This isn't Addison." Doctors tried to identify her, trying every name. Addison, Emily, Margaret. With each name spoken, her face changed color, sometimes frightened, sometimes dazed, sometimes bewildered, but no name made her truly react. She whispered, her eyes fixed on her hands. "I remember, a very dark place. Someone told me my name, but then forgot it too. Will you call my name correctly? I just want to hear it once. Once before, it pulls me back down again." The question repeated in every restless sleep, amidst dreams mixed with the sound of invisible knocking. Gabriel appeared, walking silently through the hospital's white hall. The old notebook in his hand was a treasure trove of names, whose bodies were never found, souls without graves, without anyone to remember their names, only remaining in faded missing persons lists. Gabriel sat by the girl's bed, his gaze somber. "I'll try calling. If you hear your name, let me know." He read each name, slowly, as if calling souls from the deep layers of memory. Lorelei, Evelyn, Candace. Each name was a low note, a strange breath in the hospital air thick with sedatives. When Gabriel reached the name Marguerite Quill, the girl suddenly burst into tears, each drop heavy as if scraped from someone's broken heart. "That name isn't mine." She shook her head, her voice choked. "But I know it. The person with that name was once here, inside me, but now I don't know who is waiting below anymore." Gabriel recorded her reactions, troubled by a chilling truth. At the bottom of the lake, memories and bodies had begun to exchange places. No one was sure who this girl was anymore, and she herself didn't know which memories were her own. In the middle of the night, hospital security cameras recorded the strange girl leaving her bed, gliding barefoot down the hallway. The pale lights illuminated her unsteady but strangely steady gait. She stopped in front of each room, whispering names not found on the patient list. Rachel, Sylvie, Maris. At the end of the hallway, she stopped in front of the death records room. A young nurse approached, taking her hand. "What are you doing in the middle of the night?" The girl turned her head, her movements slow as if she had just learned to move again. In that moment, her voice was no longer her own, sometimes low, sometimes shrill, sending shivers down everyone's spine. "I was never buried. Do you have my name? I needed to stay." The nurse, frightened, let go and ran, while the camera recorded the girl bowing her head over the records, her hands trembling as if searching for something only she knew. The next morning, the strange patient looked around the room, asking like someone who had never known anyone beyond the echoes from the other side of the glass, "Did anyone call my name? Or do I have to disappear again underwater?" A girl was pulled from the lake, but no one could be sure who she was. Every sleep, every question, every name called was a key unlocking a door to strange memories within this body. "If no one calls my name correctly, I will remain in anyone willing to contain that memory." All mirrors suddenly became terrifying, as no one dared to look too long. No one was sure they were still themselves. When a name was forgotten, a soul would choose to reside within the memories of the living, until the last call echoed in tune with a heart that once belonged to someone else. Gabriel sat quietly on the grassy bank, the lake bed map spread before him. The yellow glow from the oil lamp illuminated the folds, highlighting 3 dark depressions, traces of memories no one wanted to touch. Gabriel traced his finger over the circled area, marked by Mrs. Halpin with a trembling hand. Claymore Trench, 34 years, 7 missing cases. In the old notebook, a handwritten line, faded but deeply impressed on the paper. "Call it right, water still. Call it wrong, I am taken away." To his right, a small wooden box of candles had been prepared by Gabriel since the afternoon. Each candle was attached to a round wooden piece, carefully inserted into small buoys to float on the lake surface. The ancient iron bowl, rust red with time, tilted, held a bit of fresh blood Gabriel had cut from his fingertip, mixed into the water, forming a dark red swirl. The surrounding space was suffocatingly silent. Only Gabriel's whisper could be heard. This is the name-returning ritual. Whoever hears their name, return, step up from the bottom of the water to the surface. He slowly read each name from the missing persons list, each syllable echoing like a bell deep within the lake bed. Each name was a knock on the door of memory, both fervent and reckless. When Gabriel called the name Eloise Crane, the water in front of him suddenly became still as glass. All movement ceased. All the candle flames were silent, their shadows trembling as if breath was held mid-air. A dark shape gradually rose a few meters from Gabriel, not a clear human form, but a strange, elongated dark mass, as if someone carried memories stretched to distortion. No face, no eyes, no mouth, only wet hair, mud streaks spreading on the skin, and a fluttering breath that seemed to mix water and human essence. Gabriel remained calm, his lips pressed together in the mist. If you are Eloise, I call your name to return you. The dark shape slowly shook its head, its hair falling to cover its shoulders like a curtain. No, I am not Eloise, and now you have read that name, I have the right to keep a part of you. The voice fractured like cracking water, fragments of memory, exhaling a cold breath onto Gabriel's cheek. The dark shape gradually dissolved into the water. The ritual ended. Gabriel bowed his head, sitting for a long time on the bank, a growing emptiness in his chest. Standing up to return to the guest house, he suddenly realized that in his memory, a part of his life that should have been unforgettable had faded completely. The image of the first woman he ever tried to save, blurring, her name no longer on the tip of his tongue. Flipping through the notebook, Gabriel saw a page raggedly torn, the tear matching his hand's marks, but he couldn't remember why he had done it. He looked down at his palm, where there once was a faint scar, a relic of saving someone from the water, now only new pale skin. Mrs. Halpin approached, her eyes suspicious, immediately noticing something different in Gabriel's gaze, emptier, lingering around the edges of sorrow. Gabriel just shook his head slightly. I lost a part to understand that. Those below do not forgive guesswork. Some memories, once wrongly returned, will never truly come back. That night, a thick mist covered the lake, where Gabriel performed the ritual. The sky was dense, unusually silent, but from afar, residents around the shore began to hear their names being called, one by one. An old mother listened, hearing her name called by her son, who had drowned 10 years ago. An old man with a cane silently heard his wife's name echo in the wind, the exact same tone as hers before she was swept away by the water in 1989. Many silently wept, thinking it was a miracle, but each voice, after calling a name, casually uttered a whisper, "Don't call it wrong again, they can't bear it." The lake surface remained as flat as a mirror. Looking into it, the living thought they would see the past, but what they saw was only their own reflection, gradually blurring in the mist, and the shadows of the dead's names. Calling the wrong name, Gabriel traded a part of himself. The souls under Lake Lanier were not angry, nor did they blame. They simply patiently recorded all that the living had forgotten, then held it tightly at the bottom of the water as their only possession. And from now on, anyone who sets foot on the lake shore, if they don't remember the exact forgotten name, be careful, because you might have to trade a part of your memory, even your very being, to repay someone else's debt, and never get it back. When Gabriel returned to the library, thick fog hung outside the frosted glass, while inside, Mrs. Halpin had been waiting since early morning, her shadow cast upon the cold stone floor, her bent back trembling with each gust of wind that slipped under the door crack. When Gabriel placed the water chart on the table, her eyes were heavy, her lips pressed as if holding a secret that had flowed backward in her bones for the past 40 years. She didn't greet him, but silently pulled out the bottom drawer, taking out a thick yellowed envelope, so old its edges were silvered. She pushed the envelope across the table to Gabriel, her hand trembling. "You should know. This lake doesn't just hold water and human bones." Inside, a stack of typed papers, the reddish-brown ink faded, but the top of the page still clearly displayed a heavily underlined heading, "List not included in official report, per directive dated 18.6, 1955. The papers listed 137 names. Next to each name, only a few brief lines. Orphan, no next of kin, frail, claymore laborer. Near the end of the list were symbols, and additional notes in pencil. No papers, flooded at night, died of cold, no police report. Gabriel read slowly, Each name, a fading shadow on the paper, a silent humiliation no one acknowledged. The silence lingered like the morning mist. Mrs. Halpin took off her glasses, her eyes red. When the government approved Lake Lanier, they left us, this town, to deal with relocating the graves ourselves. Mayor Edward Grimley at the time, he put all the unclaimed names into this list. She pushed a copy of the internal memo, her voice breaking. They said, anyone without papers, without next of kin, was as good as never having lived here. Gabriel flipped to the pages about the Claymore residents, the homeless, orphans, hastily displaced workers. X marks crossed through many boxes, with additional notes in the margin. Died of flood, fallen wood, malaria, unreported. 1,307 names were just a small part. In the margin was Mrs. Halpin's handwriting. There are many more, no one knows them all. She leaned back against the chair, whispering as if unburdening a lifelong weight. These remaining papers, how can they return everyone who has drowned? Half of these names were never called a second time. From a locked suitcase, Halpin took out a tanned leather notebook, inside written in trembling black ink, the paper wrinkled at the edges. I once believed silence would protect this town from the cries of the dead, but the lake doesn't forget. Water is memory, and I hear them tapping in my dreams, tapping on my back every time I drink water. Gabriel's hand turned the pages, stopping at the last line. The ink blurred, the letters slanted. If anyone comes looking, tell them not to call it wrong. A wrongly spoken name is a death trapped forever. Gabriel closed his eyes, feeling the tapping echoing from the bottom of the lake, faint like a heartbeat, vibrating like breaking glass at the end of a dream. After dusk, Gabriel left the library. In front of the old town hall stood a stone tablet, commemorating those who spearheaded the lake project. But Edward Grimley's name was now scratched out, the grooves deeply cut, revealing the white stone beneath. That night, in the low-ceilinged guest house room, rain seeped through the walls. Gabriel lay awake. He plunged into a chilling dream, and in that dream, someone called his name. Not a living voice, but a whisper, a clatter, a tongue thick with mud, and a chilling sensation up his spine. Gabriel, Gabriel, you will become one of us too, if you call it wrong again. The cry erupted right at his nape, through his hair, drawing a cold breath into his very bones. Gabriel jolted awake, gasping. On the foggy window pane, someone had used black charcoal to write in reverse, Leirbag, his own name, but now reversed like the blurred path home. They died because they were forgotten. They were hidden, so the lake could be inaugurated. And now Gabriel's name has fallen into the silent waves, where every wrongly called name will be a piece of memory forever held by the water. And so the nameless, numberless dead silently tap on the dreams of the next generation, waiting until someone is brave enough to call them again, correctly, once, without error, without forgetting. On the first full moon night, after his own name was wrongly called, Gabriel quietly prepared for the final ritual, guided by the blurred lines in Mayor Grimley's old leather notebook. The deepest part of Lake Lanier was marked by him, once the center of old Claymore town, now only existing on forgotten maps. Gabriel took out a soft gold leaf, carved with willow tree ash collected from the water's edge. He wrote on it with a trembling black ink, I don't call it wrong, I just want to hear it right. Donning a heavy lead coat to easily sink into the water, Gabriel clutched the old iron cup and the notebook stained with the last three names. On his lips there was only one torment. If they are truly still there, do I dare to remember them to the end? The air on the lake's surface was chilling, but as Gabriel dived, a strangely warm layer of water enveloped him, like blood flowing constantly beneath thin skin. He sank deeper, feeling the moonbeams blur, distorting into pale streetlights. Below, the old market, sidewalks, the church with faded stone walls covered in moss, all submerged but not wet, moving faintly like images of memories from long ago. Gabriel waded through the faceless people, obstructing the cold space. In the center, a child huddled in a worn sweater, sitting with knees hugged to its chest, back turned, bare feet kicking the water. When Gabriel was about to speak, it spoke, its voice soft as decaying leaves. My name was once on a tombstone, but then they removed it, putting someone else there. Do you carry names? Gabriel's hand trembled as he flipped the notebook. Only 3 names remained. The ink faded. Claudia Wick, Jacob Fenley, all unvetch. He chose the name that had just popped into his mind, took a deep breath, and hoped for luck. Jacob Fenley. At that moment, the child was silent. The lake's prayer subsided, no ray of light penetrating through. Like a stumble from reality, Claymore shattered into fragments of streetlight. The child slowly turned its face, empty eye sockets, dark patches extending to its temples. Its voice rang out, broken,
simultaneously as if three people were speaking at once in its throat. "That name isn't mine. Now then, it's your turn." The light went out. Gabriel fell through the lake, a cold sensation enveloping him from glassy memories to his fingertips. Gabriel woke up, coughing and spitting black mud at the lake's edge. Grass blades stuck to him, covered in fishy earth, his hair matted like a drowned corpse. Gabriel tried to stand, his head spinning, each breath smelling of rotten roots pouring from his chest. He fumbled in his pocket for his notebook to record the ritual he had just experienced, but began to realize that the words he wrote were no longer his own. His handwriting, his posture, even the way he signed Gabriel Blackwell on his passport, all strange, distant, as if a part of his memory had just been taken away. Mrs. Halpin rushed over, screaming when she saw him trembling in the mist. "Gabriel, what did you just do? Are you all right?" Gabriel whispered, each word breaking into a sob. "I once knew whose name was mine, but now I'm not sure if that's me anymore." As Mrs. Halpin helped Gabriel away from the water's edge, the lake suddenly bubbled in the middle. From the depths, a rotten wooden plank floated up. The wind gently pushed it adrift, tilting it to reveal old letters etched with rusty nails. Orlan Memvech, 1941, never buried. This was the name of someone who had never appeared in reports, had no grave, and whose body was never identified. Gabriel whispered, his eyes fixed on the name on the wood. "So, they have names. It's just that the water holds them, so others have to find them." The memory of the dead doesn't lie in voices, but in the gaze of someone who wants to call their name one last time. Gabriel began to lose his own name, little by little, because he had voluntarily stepped into the still water, where every wrong name was just a deep bottom waiting for someone to remember it. And under that night's moon, in the silent heart of the lake, the debt-bearer understood that he himself was disappearing into the realm of memories reserved only for the utterly forgotten. Many years later, people still spoke of that night as the night of lost names. One night after Gabriel's full moon ritual, over 40 people in the town of Lanier slowly woke from their sleep, eyes bloodshot, mouths dry, and a chilling confusion gripping their bones. In their dreams they stood in a line on the lake's surface, their feet not touching the water, moonlight casting the sharp cold of dead silver upon their skin. A vague, steady voice, neither male nor female, echoed from all directions. Saul Pell, Camille Trent, Orlan Vetch, Lucinda Harris. Strange names followed one another like chains around a neck. In their dreams everyone knew those weren't their names, but by the third time they heard them, they began to feel as if someone had attached a new name to their forehead, to their tongue. When they woke up, a third of them no longer responded to their own names. At the bank, the employee May Whitford signed a form with strange handwriting, writing Clarice M. When the manager asked, "Are you all right, May?" she froze, startled. "Everyone keeps calling me May, but all night, I heard someone calling me Clarice M, and now, I'm not sure who I am anymore."
Throughout the town, wrong signatures, incomplete documents, and lost gazes appeared frequently. Old class photos, yearbooks, every name printed since the 80s, now suddenly seemed strange, deeply sorrowful. From early morning, the town of Lanier was like a graveyard of its own memory. One person recalled sights they had never seen. Another mumbled secrets of the market that had been submerged for half a century. Old man Dale sat alone in front of the sink, his hand turning the faucet, water endlessly flowing. His wife suddenly stood outside the door, hearing his whispers, sobbing, "Lucinda, I'm sorry. If your name was still remembered, you wouldn't drag me down like this." Children suddenly spoke of a blue wooden school no one had ever mentioned, describing in detail the streets of Old Claymore's Center from the 1950s, with strange archaic accents and words. The young teacher had to stop her lesson when a student identified herself as Beth Harriet, sobbing when called by her real name. Throughout the town, souls unwilling to reincarnate began to reside in borrowed memories, through names that had never been called correctly. Gabriel was not possessed, his body was not borrowed, but every night he sat by the lake, enduring each spasm in his chest. The mist rising from the lake was no longer cold, but thickened his throat with a choking sensation, like someone squeezing his heart and lungs empty, overwhelming despair without a scream reaching the surface. He tasted the muddy water, feeling his fingertips constantly plunging into the lake bottom, only touching cold mud and finding no one to hold his hand back. Each time the pain came, Gabriel writhed on the grass, gasping for breath. One day, when he collapsed at the water's edge, Mrs. Halpin rushed to support him. Gabriel clutched her arm, whispering each word with difficulty. "It's not that they want to live again, they just don't accept being lived for by someone else." That pain was misplaced. It came from longing, from anger, from the feeling of having one's name choked until one no longer knew who one was in the sea of humanity. One cold morning, at the lakeside rescue station, a young girl was seen slowly walking from the water onto land. Long black hair, an old white dress, all perfectly matched the missing photo of Eleanor, the girl who disappeared in 1997, nearly 30 years ago. The strange thing, she hadn't aged, the small scar on her chin still intact. Eleanor sat silently in the corner of the table, her brown eyes tinged with water mist, just biting her lip without speaking. When her family arrived, her elderly mother trembled. "Eleanor, is that you? Are you really back?" She only shook her head, whispering, "If everyone still remembers me, does anyone remember how my name is spelled? Under the lake someone is waiting for that name to leave me." A relative hastily wrote Eleanor in a notebook, reading it aloud in the room thick with disinfectant. Immediately, Eleanor writhed, blood gushing from both ears. Her eyes glazed over, then she collapsed to the floor. Her heart still beat, but all words were forever sealed behind a silent membrane. By the time Gabriel arrived, it was too late. He sat down next to Eleanor, took her cold hand and understood. At the bottom of the lake, souls would not willingly enter living bodies if their names were not called correctly. They demanded validation, demanded to hear their names spoken once by someone whose memory was strong enough. Otherwise, they would drag the living down into the abyss of forgetting with them. The lake does not accept the living. It only retains the names never called correctly, serving as a dwelling place for memories, for the unfulfilled existence of the dead. And now, those names are beginning to return, seeking empty shells within bodies lost in search of themselves. Gabriel, the debt-bearer, never died, yet he carried the sensation of slowly dying in memory, bit by bit, layer by layer, silently submerged by names that belonged to no one still remembered. Moonlight rolled across the lake, reflecting hundreds of figures in new guises. Beneath the water, whispers of the living, now also beginning to become souls never called correctly, one last time. In the bright midday sun, Lake Lanier was as still as glass, not a ripple, no one on the grassy bank. Rowan, Addison's younger brother, held an old faded photograph, sitting quietly on the wooden bridge that curved towards the water. The smell of damp wood mingled with the scent of muddy algae, and in his ears only the buzzing of insects lingered in the summer air. Suddenly, a figure glimmered, emerging from the heart of the lake, only about 5 meters from the shore. It was Addison, or her shadow, her long, sleek black hair reaching her waist and soaking wet, her white birthday dress stained from years ago. Her eyes looked straight through him, neither sad nor happy, as if all emotions had drained from her life. Rowan froze, then ran from the bridge, jumping into the lake, trying to rescue his sister, but Addison did not sink, nor did she retreat, the water not even reaching her ankles. She stood there patiently, her eyes glowing with a gentle, chilling light. In the intersection of wind and mist, she whispered, loud enough to penetrate every ripple, "You once promised to remember me, so why can't you read my handwritten name correctly now?" Addison turned away, leaving a long flowing shadow on the water that dissolved into the midday mist. Rowan collapsed, his heart overflowing with regret, because no one but him knew the true name she had once called herself. Rowan trembled as he ran back to Addison's old dormitory. Gabriel was already waiting in a dark corner, his deep eyes shadowed by the wide brim of his hat and the slanting rays of the late afternoon sun. Rowan pulled a faded, silvered piece of paper from an old wooden music box, its corner long since torn by biting. On it, childish, crooked handwriting read, "Addison Rowe." He choked out, "My silly sister. She misspelled her name countless times. When we were kids, I swore that no matter where she went, I'd still call her that. But growing up, people kept making me correct it. Now I'm not sure if I should remember it the wrong way, or by the official papers." Gabriel listened, his voice deep and cracked like pebbles worn by a stream. No one can hold a soul with blood, but they can hold them with precise memory. Don't call it by rules, call it by old promises. Sometimes, that wrong thing is the lost door. Rowan clutched the scrap of paper, tears blurring the old unfaded ink. In the afternoon, Rowan and Gabriel returned to the rock protruding from the deep water. Rowan used a knife to clumsily carve lines onto the rock face. "I remember my sister. Her name is Addison Rowe. No one changed it but herself." Gabriel carefully lit an incense stick, letting the faint smoke curl down onto the water like a thread connecting two shores of memory. They were silent, neither calling nor demanding anything strange. No soul emerged, no ghostly light, not even an unusual breeze, only a faint sob gradually fading in the wind, weak,
suppressed like a child pushed into the deepest quiet of the world. And then, as both were about to turn away, a rotten piece of paper drifted to the shore, its surface stained but the handwriting still clear. Addison Rowe. The handwriting was crooked, childish, exactly Addison's handwriting at 6 years old. Even as other memories gradually faded, that fragment of memory clung to time, strangely steadfast. That night, in his dream, Gabriel saw himself drifting at the bottom of the lake, where long stone benches were silently arranged in a circle, no longer holding figures waiting for their names to be called. In the middle, a withered bouquet of wildflowers floated to the surface, then vanished into the morning mist. On the lake's surface, the name Addison Rowe was blurred, fading like the last breath of a distant summer. When dawn knocked, Rowan woke up, his eyes dry. Now I no longer see any faces under the water. I guess she doesn't need anyone to see her to exist anymore. She was remembered, not through papers, not through family or law, but through a small promise, a memory once considered wrong. A wrong name can trap a soul forever. A distorted memory can prevent the dead from leaving. But if someone dares to remember that very wrong thing correctly, if they dare to hold on to that unverified fragment of memory, the lake will stop holding them back, and in somewhere, on the boundary between memory and reality, a soul was freed, simply because someone still believed in the fragile beauty of misspelled things no one bothered to correct. Gabriel returned to the third depression, the deepest, darkest part of Lake Lanier, where no one had dared to venture since the town of Claymore disappeared from the map. That night, there was no moon. The wind howled over the vast, chilling water, and Gabriel carried a new wound, a trace of memory that had just been called correctly, but had also cost him a part of himself in previous chapters. This time, he did not perform ancient rituals, carry floating candles, pray to deities, or wait for a sacred sign. He only opened the old notebook again, its pages rotten, crisscrossed with trembling handwriting from decades past. All an M-Vetch, all an M-Vetch, all an M-Vetch. The name repeated, no different from a curse drilling down to the very bottom of the water. It was also the name carved on the rotten wooden plank that surfaced after the moon ritual. End of chapter 7. Gabriel took a deep breath, snipped a strand of hair from his thinning head, and wrapped it around a small iron ring, the only keepsake he still carried since losing his memory. He dropped it into the lake, leaving everything else to the memory of the water. Then Gabriel spoke, his voice echoing as if calling himself. Orlan M. Vetch, I remember your name. I am the last caller. If there is still a place for you to rest, I will prepare it for you. For so many years, no one had dared to call this name correctly from the deep mud. No ghost appeared on the water, nor was there a terrifying scream. Instead, the lake's surface suddenly swelled like lungs, struggling to breathe again after clinical death. Then from the depths, letters began to surface, their imprints like charcoal, spreading a faint trail through the silver waves. First were Jericho T. Elaine, surname unknown, Cedar Brown, died 1958, Catherine O. Owen Reese, Claymore, 1954, and so, hundreds of names followed, non-repeating, climbing onto the water's surface like roots digging endlessly through soil. The words slowly crept across the waves, carving into the morning mist, the forms of countless memories no one had ever called correctly. Gabriel knelt at the water's edge. The cold wind scraped his skin but did not linger. A small trickle of blood flowed from his chest, mingling with the water, but it wasn't flesh and blood, but a part of the memories that once belonged to those he had permanently forgotten. He hoarsely uttered a sentence amidst the waves. No one can hold all of you, but if someone calls it correctly once, you are allowed to dissolve. The lake grew still, the misty light gently embracing each name, returning them gradually to their long-lost origins. The next morning, Lanier was shaken. At the end of the town cemetery, hundreds of old stone tablets, once lying scattered behind the unmarked burial ground, had shattered during the night. Deep cracks revealed pieces of rotten wood inside, each piece carved with an old name, names that had been crossed out from records, names no one dared to call clearly, residents who had temporarily lost their memories in previous chapters. Those who had dreamt of strange names in their collective dream suddenly woke up, confused, asking their spouses and children, "Is the name in the dream still there? I forgot who I am, but I clearly remember that person used to be me."
Mrs. Halpin, frail with age, opened an ancient, unopened file from the library basement. In it, for the first time, appeared the complete original list of 137 people who died during the Claymore flood, the last true names returned from the bottom of the lake. Throughout the town, spontaneous memorial services took place. People stood in circles around the cracked gravestones, reading each name echoing through the morning sun, as if each pronunciation was a release of a 1,000-year-old wish. As evening fell, no one saw Gabriel in the crowd at the memorial. People only mentioned that morning. A man quietly boarded a long-distance bus, carrying no luggage, leaving nothing behind but a thick notebook filled with pencil notes. A young newspaper boy named Johnny ran to the bus stop, curiously asking with hope, "What's your name, sir? What's your real name?" Gabriel smiled, his eyes distant and filled with the peace of someone who had just finished a long-lasting dream. He didn't answer, only slipped the last remaining notebook into the boy's hand. On the first page, a line written diagonally, "My name doesn't matter, but if someone is forgotten, call them once correctly. They don't need to live again, they just need not to be replaced by emptiness." As the bus rolled out of town, no one saw him anymore. In the wind blowing through Lanier Valley, it seemed a faint whisper of someone silently reading the names once buried, once mistaken, once dropped from memory. Not all the dead want to come back. Some just need someone to still call them by their correct, uncorrected name. And if no one remembers, there will be someone, not a priest, not a shaman, just someone, bearing the oath. "I will remember you. I will remember you, by your true old name, not a single word wrong." And in that watery realm, silent as mist, the final call echoed, not to bring back to life, not to cling, but so that what once existed could be returned to memory in its original form, no one daring to alter it anymore. Some deaths don't need to be unjust. Some souls don't need to find peace. They just need one thing, simpler than any ritual, to be remembered by their correct name, one time, before fading. Throughout this story, Gabriel did not fight ghosts. He did not exorcise, did not burn talismans, did not chant prayers. He just listened, called correctly, and heard for them. Because perhaps the cruelest thing is not death, but when the whole world walks past someone without remembering what name they once bore. If you have ever forgotten someone, ever seen a familiar face, but couldn't recall the name, ever promised something to the deceased, but haven't kept your word, share this story so they can be heard again, and comment the name of the person you don't want to forget. Perhaps, somewhere, they are still waiting for you to call them correctly. Thank you for following the story to the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and share so Whisper Horror Channel can continue to bring you whispers from the other side of memory. We broadcast regularly every week, and every week is a debt unpaid. See you in the next story, where a coffin was sealed incorrectly, and someone inside is still tapping every night. Are you sure the name on your loved one's tombstone is correct?